Have you ever seen a map that has lines and numbers that look like this? What do you think these lines and numbers mean? Let's find out. So on a globe and map, you can see lines and numbers next to them. These lines and numbers form a grid that helps us describe any location on Earth. From the video you watched yesterday, we see that the Earth can be split in half. When we split the Earth in half horizontally, we're splitting it into northern and southern hemispheres. So up top we have northern, and down below we have southern. And the line that splits this is called the equator. If you think of a compass that measures north, east, south, and west, the north is up top and the south is on the bottom. So when we're looking at a globe, this equator line separates the north and the south hemisphere. If you see these horizontal lines going across the globe, these are actually lines that run east to west. But we refer to them as northern and southern lines of latitude. So if you notice, it starts at 0 and goes up to 15 degrees north, 30 degrees north, 45 degrees north, 60 degrees north, 75, and 90 degrees north is the highest point north that you can go. If you go south, same thing. There's a line that's 15 degrees, 30 degrees, 45, 60, 75, and 90 degrees south. In between each of these lines is even smaller lines that measure 0 to 15. So there'd be a 1 degree line, 2, 3, 4, 5, all the way up to 15. But all these lines are imaginary, so you can't actually see any of them on the globe. These are called lines of latitude. And again, they're lines that run from east to west, but they measure the northern and southern hemisphere, which is separated by this equator, measuring 0 degrees. So if we were to find some place in North America, any point in North America would be in the northern hemisphere, and it'd have a northern latitude. That's measured in degrees north. Anything in the northern hemisphere is measured in degrees north. Anything in the southern hemisphere or below the equator is measured in degrees south. All the way to 90. Okay, so those are lines of latitude. They run from east to west, and they measure in the northern and southern hemispheres. The other lines on a map or globe that run from north to south are called lines of longitude. Okay, there's that word longitude. Same thing as the lines that run east to west, or the latitude lines. The longitude lines are identified by the Prime Meridian, which is 0 degrees. And again, since we're measuring north and south, our hemispheres are the eastern hemisphere and the western hemisphere. So these measurements are lines that run north and south, but the measurements are either east or west, depending on which side of the Prime Meridian you're on. Although this map only shows half the globe, these degrees actually go up to 180, and we'll see that in the next example we look at. But each of these lines also goes from the North Pole to the south, and in between 0 to 15, even though you can't see them, are 1 degree lines of longitude, 2 degrees, 3 degrees, 4 degrees, all the way to 15. It just wouldn't be able to see if you packed all those lines in there. So again, these lines are called lines of longitude, and you can think of it because they are long lines that go up and down. Lines of longitude run north to south, but measure the eastern and western hemispheres. Let's look at a map of all these lines put together. Here's an example of our entire map, our entire world, and this map specifically shows the travels of some early explorers such as Christopher Columbus, and they obviously didn't walk through the water, they took ships, so it was very important for them to know where they were going. So on this map you can see that there are our lines of longitude, which run north to south. Here's our compass down here if we need it also. And then we have our lines of latitude that run east to west. And on this map, we can also see our 0 degree markers, which is the equator that runs at 0 degrees. And then we also have our line that runs up and down, or a line of longitude that measures 0 degrees, and this is called the Prime Meridian. So we can see we have our northern hemisphere all up here, we have our southern hemisphere, we have our eastern hemisphere, and our western hemisphere. So when we put all these points together on a map, we can use these lines to find where specific places are. For example, if we're looking at Cairo here, it's in Africa, so we can use these lines to find out exactly where it is. So we're going to start by looking at the lines of latitude. And we can just simply trace this over to see what degree line of latitude is on. And I see it's on 30 degrees north. It's above the equator, so it's in the northern hemisphere. And then we can look at our lines of longitude also. Again, just trace that down, and I can see that it is on, it's a little bit past 30, so it's about 31 degrees east. So we say the coordinates for Cairo are 30 degrees north and 31 degrees east. So each point has 2 numbers associated with it. If we were to find another point, let's say we're looking at New Orleans. We'll do that a different color. So New Orleans is actually in North America. It's about right there. So if I were to find the points of New Orleans, I'd start by looking at the northern latitude lines, because it's above the equator north. And I see that it is also 30 degrees north. You can use a little circle to represent degrees. So it's 30 degrees north, and then on our lines of longitude, we're going to trace it down, and it's 90 degrees west. Okay, 2 numbers that help us find this point on the map. Let's look at somewhere in the southern hemisphere. Let's say we wanted to find the coordinates of a city or town in Australia. Let's mark that with green. Okay, so I would use my map and the lines to find the coordinates of this city in Australia. So I'd start by finding my north and south lines, and it's below the equator this time, so it's in the southern hemisphere, and I see that it's 30 degrees south. And it's on the eastern side of the Prime Meridian, so it's going to be measured in degrees east. It's going to go all the way over to 135 degrees east. Degrees east. Right? And those are the coordinates for this city in Australia. When we have these two numbers together, those are called coordinates. Okay? You use coordinates to find places on the map. This is particularly useful for people driving ships or flying airplanes to get to the points they need to go. Nowadays, there's lots of fancy technology that tells them exactly where they are as they're flying or driving a boat or a ship. It tells them exactly where they're going and which direction they need to head.